What you are about to hear is the story of a forbidden love between a noble samurai and a graceful geisha, set beneath the cherry blossoms of Edo. The Cherry Blossom Festival in Edo was a sight to behold, as delicate pink petals filled the air and drifted gently to the ground like snow. The air was thick with the sweet fragrance of the Sakura trees, and the streets were alive with the sounds of music, laughter, and celebration. But amidst the beauty and festivity, Hiroshi, a noble samurai bound by duty and honor, felt only the weight of the world on his shoulders. Hiroshi's life had always been defined by his loyalty to his daimyo, the lord he served without question. His every action was dictated by the Bushido Code, and he had long since accepted that his path was one of sacrifice. But when his eyes fell upon Sayuri, a geisha of unmatched grace and beauty, everything he thought he knew about his place in the world was thrown into turmoil. Sayuri, with her flowing kimono adorned with intricate patterns, moved through the festival like a whisper of wind. She entertained wealthy merchants and nobles alike with her elegance and charm, her fan fluttering in her hand as she laughed softly at their jokes. But behind the mask of her profession, Sayuri's heart longed for something more, something real. Their first encounter was fleeting. Hiroshi had been watching from a distance as Sayuri performed a traditional dance beneath the cherry blossoms, her every movement mesmerizing. Their eyes met for the briefest of moments, but in that instant, something passed between them, a connection neither of them could deny. Over the next few days, Hiroshi found himself returning to the same spot beneath the cherry trees, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sayuri. He knew that his interest in her was dangerous, that a samurai and a geisha could never be together, but his heart was not so easily swayed by the rules of society. One evening, as the festival's celebrations reached their peak, Hiroshi finally approached her. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the blossoms, and the night was quiet as they stood beneath the sakura trees. "You shouldn't be here," Sayuri said softly, though there was no anger in her voice. She looked at Hiroshi with curious eyes, her fan hiding the smile that tugged at her lips. "A samurai and a geisha. It is not allowed." "I know," Hiroshi replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I couldn't stay away." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them thick with unspoken words. The petals fell around them, landing gently on their shoulders like a blessing from the gods. "I have seen you many times, Sayuri," Hiroshi continued, his hand clenching at his side. "And each time, I feel something I cannot explain. I know that it is forbidden, that we come from different worlds, but I cannot pretend that this feeling is not real." Sayuri's heart pounded in her chest. She had spent her life perfecting the art of mystery, of keeping her true self hidden behind layers of performance and grace. But something in Hiroshi's eyes made her feel seen, truly seen for the first time. "I feel it too," she whispered, lowering her fan and stepping closer to him. "But what you ask of me? It cannot be." Hiroshi knew she was right. The world they lived in would never allow their love. A samurai's honor was everything, and to be involved with a geisha would bring dishonor upon him and his family. But even knowing this, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. "We have this moment," Hiroshi said softly, reaching out to gently take her hand. "And that is enough." For the first time in years, Sayuri let her guard down. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, to feel the weight of her own desires. And beneath the cherry blossoms, they shared their first kiss, tender and filled with longing, a promise of something that could never be. But as they held each other in the quiet of the night, the world around them continued to turn. Duty and honor still loomed large, and the consequences of their love would soon become impossible to ignore. The cherry blossom festival had come and gone, but the memory of that night beneath the Sakura trees lingered in the minds of both Hiroshi and Sayuri. What began as a brief, forbidden encounter had blossomed into a love neither could deny. They met in secret whenever they could, stealing moments in the hidden corners of Edo, far from the watchful eyes of society. Each time they were together, the tension between love and duty weighed heavily on them. For Hiroshi, every glance, every touch of Sayuri's hand was a betrayal of the Bushido code that had shaped his life. His honor was everything, his loyalty to his daimyo, his place in the samurai class, and his duty to his family. But with Sayuri, those rules seemed distant, overshadowed by the intensity of their connection. "I can't keep doing this," Sayuri whispered one night, her voice trembling as they stood in the shadows of the tea house where she lived. "Every time we meet, I feel as if we are walking on a blade's edge. One wrong step, and everything we have could be destroyed." Hiroshi's heart ached at her words, but he knew she was right. Their love, as beautiful as it was dangerous. The consequences of discovery would be severe not just for him, but for Sayuri as well. She could lose her status as a geisha, her livelihood, everything she had worked so hard to achieve. "I know," Hiroshi replied, his hand resting gently on her cheek. "But what else can we do? I can't stop loving you." Sayuri closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, savoring the warmth and safety of his presence. "I wish we could be together without hiding, without fear." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The cherry blossoms had long since fallen, replaced by the lush green of summer, but the beauty of the world around them only seemed to underscore the impossibility of their love. And then came the news that would shatter the fragile peace they had built together. One evening, as Hiroshi made his way to meet Sayuri, he was stopped by his daimyo's messenger. The warlords in the north had risen in rebellion, and Hiroshi's lord had called upon him and his fellow samurai to ride into battle. His departure would be swift. He was to leave the next morning at dawn. The news hit Hiroshi like a blow to the chest. War was an inevitable part of the samurai's life, but the timing of this call to duty could not have been worse. He had so little time to prepare for battle, time to say goodbye to Sayuri. As the messenger left, Hiroshi stood frozen, the weight of his duty pulling him in one direction, while his heart ached for the woman he loved. He knew he had to see her one last time. That night, Hiroshi found Sayuri waiting for him in the garden behind the tea house, the lanterns casting soft shadows over her face. She smiled when she saw him, but the joy in her expression quickly faded when she saw the look in his eyes. "Hiroshi, what's wrong?" she asked, her heart pounding with fear. "I've been called to war," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I leave at dawn." Sayuri's breath caught in her throat. She had always known that this moment would come, that Hiroshi's duty as a samurai would eventually pull him away from her, but she had never imagined it would happen so soon. "War," she whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for his. "But what about us?" Hiroshi pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I don't know what will happen, or if I will return. But I need you to know that I love you, Sayuri. No matter what happens, no matter where I go, my heart belongs to you." Sayuri buried her face in his chest, her tears wetting the fabric of his kimono. "I love you too, Hiroshi," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But how will I go on if you don't come back?" Hiroshi pulled back, his hands cupping her face as he looked into her eyes. "You must stay strong," he said softly. "You have always been strong." Promise me that no matter what happens, you will continue to live your life." Sayuri nodded, though her heart felt as though it were breaking in two. "I promise," she whispered, though the words felt hollow. They spent the rest of the night together, savoring every second, every touch, knowing that it could be their last. As dawn approached, Hiroshi prepared to leave, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he was walking away from the only happiness he had ever known. Before he left, he pressed a small piece of paper into Sayuri's hand. "I will send letters when I can," he said softly. "And I will return to you. I swear it." Sayuri clutched the paper tightly, her tears falling freely now. "I will wait for you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. As Hiroshi mounted his horse and rode off into the early morning light, Sayuri watched him disappear into the distance, her heart filled with both love and fear. The world around her felt empty, as if the beauty of the cherry blossoms had faded along with Hiroshi's departure. The war would soon tear them apart, but their love fragile and forbidden remained. And so, as the weeks passed, Sayuri waited, her heart clinging to the hope that Hiroshi would return. But as the war raged on, the future became more uncertain, and Sayuri's hope began to falter. Weeks turned into months, and the war dragged on with no end in sight. The once bustling streets of Edo had quieted, and whispers of distant battles filled the air. For Sayuri, each day without word from Hiroshi felt like an eternity. She continued her duties as a geisha, performing with grace and precision, but her heart wasn't in it. Every time she danced beneath the lanterns or played her shamisen, her mind wandered to him, wondering if he was alive, if he was safe, if he would ever return. The letters Hiroshi had promised never came. Days blurred into weeks, and though she tried to remain strong, as Hiroshi had asked, the silence gnawed at her. At night, she would sit alone in the garden behind the tea house, the place where they had shared their most intimate moments, and stare up at the sky. The Sakura trees had bloomed and shed their petals once more, but the beauty of the cherry blossoms only deepened her longing. She held onto the last letter he had given her before he left, reading it over and over again, as if the ink on the page could somehow bring him closer. Then, one fateful evening, Sayuri received a message that would shatter her fragile hope. One of Hiroshi's fellow samurai, wounded and returning from battle, arrived at the tea house. The moment Sayuri saw him, her heart sank, knowing that whatever news he carried could only bring heartbreak. The samurai bowed deeply before speaking, his voice low and solemn. "I bring news of Hiroshi," he said, his eyes filled with sorrow. Sayuri felt the world tilt beneath her feet as she braced herself for the words she dreaded most. "He fought bravely with honor," the samurai continued, "but in the final battle, he was gravely wounded. Hiroshi is gone." The air left Sayuri's lungs, and she stumbled backward, her vision blurring with tears. Gone. The word echoed in her mind, tearing at her soul. Hiroshi, the man she had loved with every part of herself, the man who had promised to return to her, was gone. Her hands trembled as she clutched the letter he had left her, the only piece of him she had left. The samurai continued to speak, offering condolences and recounting Hiroshi's final moments, but Sayuri couldn't hear him. All she could think of was the time they had spent together beneath the cherry blossoms, the stolen moments of passion, the whispered promises, the love that had bloomed against all odds. And now it had been cut short by the cruelty of war. For days, Sayuri shut herself away from the world, her heart heavy with grief. The thought of living without Hiroshi was unbearable, but she knew that she had to honor his memory by keeping the promise she had made to live, even when it felt impossible. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sakura trees swayed gently in the breeze, Sayuri made her way to the garden where they had first confessed their love. She stood beneath the cherry blossoms, her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at the delicate petals falling around her. "This was supposed to be our place," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You were supposed to come back to me." But there was no response, only the quiet rustle of the wind in the trees. Sayuri knelt beneath the largest cherry tree, the one where they had shared their first kiss, and gently placed Hiroshi's letter at the base of the trunk. "You told me to be strong," she whispered. "But how can I be strong when you are gone?" The moonlight bathed the garden in a soft glow, and as Sayuri sat in the quiet, something within her shifted. The grief still weighed heavily on her, but in that moment, she realized that Hiroshi would always be with her, in the petals of the sakura, in the moonlight that had watched over them, in the memories that would never fade. She stood slowly wiping away her tears, and looked up at the sky. The stars twinkled above, and for the first time since Hiroshi had left, Sayuri allowed herself to smile, a small, fragile smile, but one filled with love. Hiroshi may have been gone, but their love had not died. It would live on in the beauty of the world around her, in every cherry blossom that fell, in every whisper of the wind. And as Sayuri turned to leave the garden, she carried Hiroshi with her, knowing that their love, though forbidden, though tragically cut short, had transcended the boundaries of duty, honor, and death. The cherry blossoms continued to fall, a reminder that even the most beautiful things in life are fleeting, but their beauty remains forever in the heart.